personal branding, and I'm only doing this because I've got people I think over on YouTube that set in and watch it kind of on the outside, so we'll fire things up. We can make some sense of it tonight. Okay. Everybody get your microphones. You should have Bucket Lift up. Welcome to tonight's INE Network broadcast. My name's Lou Jensen, and this is the weekly gathering of the INE Network. We've been doing this for 8 years now on webinars. We're a gathering of people who have discovered a talent, want to try and develop it, and hopefully one day master it, and then learn to share our talents. And it's kind of evolved into what I call the Artistic Business Academy, because most of us just don't understand the marketplace really well, and we wrestle with it, it seems like, our whole lives. And the idea was to help with individual concepts. We just finished a 3-part series on pricing, which is a tough thing for artists, and then we did a 5-part series on upscale marketing, and then I started on this 3-part series of personal branding. Last week, I still am struggling with the cold. And last week, when I started coughing and having all kinds of presentation problems, I was so embarrassed. And there's just no good way to deal with that when you're live and you're a one-man band. It really gets to be an issue. And I finished the show last week and then discovered that all I was doing was talking to myself. The whole last half hour, my computer had dropped the connection for the show, and you guys all went away, but I didn't know you were away because I was doing the slideshow. Today I've been watching The Bucket List. I never did see this with Jack and Morgan, and it's just such a fun movie. And right in the beginning of it, he said, he was talking to Morgan, and Morgan had his earphones on, and he says, and here I am talking to myself. And I thought, no, that's just how life goes. You just never quite know what's involved with you're trying to share the information that you've gathered up. And so I thought, well, I'll just redo part 2 and get it a little better complete format if we can as a recording, and then put it up, and then I'll kill the other one that's only half there. So if you can kind of stay with me, and I apologize for covering similar territory for some of you. I've done this same show for 2 or 3 years in a row, with the idea that personal branding is a rather hard concept to get your hands on. We're going to talk about Craig Hone quite a bit tonight and see if we can't have you begin to work at this moving target. Personal brand is the boiled down version of who you most want to become. So the person you present to the marketplace is who you perhaps wish you were, not entirely who you might be at the moment. And it's really hard to realize that that's a mechanism that does help you more than anyone else. It's the moving target of which you hope that you one day might become. Everything I'm going to present comes from my own personal journey. The evolution of Lou Jensen has been a 38-year adventure, and in a couple hours I'm going to go through my story one more time. I do it every year at Easter time because it's this evolution from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and trying to turn nothing into something has been the goal of my whole existence. I work with my favorite images. I pick up the favorite stories that have impact for me, the people that I travel with on the journey of my life and what they meant. And that mixture is how I have measured my own existence. And I hope that you'll all look at it from that same perspective. What's changed my life has been a profitable hobby. If I'd have never found something to play with that actually paid the bills, I don't know how the end of my years would have gone. And the most valuable thing to me has been that ability to pay for my travel and my play and enjoying growing old with a business format that allowed me to actually be able to do more of that. I tell the story of a guy that was in gun shows next to me. I did several shows, several years with him here in Utah. And he would be right next to me, cuts these little rubber band guns out with scroll saw, does the gun show, and then sells these as little kits for dads to give to their children. And he did okay, made enough to be able to justify doing the show, but I was always concerned that it never seemed to me to get a whole lot better for him. And I don't understand the position of going and doing it the same old way every time just because that's how you've always done it. I always am looking for ways to improve and make things work. And here he'd been right next to me watching this engraving all the time. And finally one time he says, "Doc, what the hell is it that you really sell?" And I says, "I'm going to show you a relationship trick here that I think you've been ignoring." I said, "Every time you get a chance to sell a gun and someone's interested, say to them, if you buy the gun today, my neighbor here with this engraver will put the name of your child on the guns for them today, right while they're here, for free." Now all we did was shift that little tiny wrinkle at the moment of interest, at the point of interest, and draw the customer over into an actual purchase, because they then got some personalization element to the product that they were thinking about anyway. And that personalization element was a freebie. Now everybody who's used a drill and knows how quick a $6.99 can put somebody's name on a handle or a side of a gun, wooden gun, knows what a slam dunk that was for me. And all it did was show off my equipment even more. And I would invariably sell a system or two because someone would all of a sudden see what custom power high-speed engraving with that power pen will actually do. And so needless to say, we changed his position in the marketplace pretty damn dramatically. And that part's what I want to talk about in the second step. Tonight we begin to help you build your brand. Because once you find this pathway, what you're after is which way should I go with what time I have left. And it needs to be a personal journey, not doing what someone else is doing. You're trying to find your own way to make this work. When I started the I&E Network in 1983, we kind of boiled things down between Tammy and Keith Holm and Gary Price, and I started the I&E Network. And we were looking at discovering a talent, mastering that talent, and then learning to share it. And this is where the passion comes from. That's the most incredible thing, when someone walks into your life, sees what you're producing, and says, "I want to buy that." And I used to hand out a lot of pills in my old days, people helping with their aches and pains. And yet now the only prescription I hand out is a passionate one. Something that I think every person growing into their last few years needs to find some really motivating things to play with. And if you put yourself in the middle of this 7-step program to go from an amateur to the master of something, it's a pretty predictable path from amateur to apprentice to technician to artisan. Right in here, artisan and professionals, when you start making some money with it. As soon as you get some skills, then there's invariably somebody says, "Well, you teach me how to do what you're doing." Then you become a trainer and a coach. And I hand out the master's title at the end. Most people are pretty uncomfortable with saying they've mastered anything. So when I think you've finally gotten your act together and you've got some serious potential in the marketplace, then I put a master's title on everybody playing with the I&E Network. Most people don't spend much time on the business side of the hobby. They like to play with the hobby, but learning the business thereof, the hobbypreneurship part, they don't do much with. I've got a 12-hour course in how to learn small business, which is the trading mechanism. 52 cards of the trading games in my books. opportunity intersection. Learning what cards are in the game and how to play them and when to play them is a big deal. Upscale marketing is the only market I think you should target and make your efforts toward. And then there's always this ABC factors, the things that affect most small businesses. So in the last given year, let me ask you the question, how many hours have you invested trying to learn the business side of your hobby? And many people can't answer this very well. They don't mind doing all the fun stuff over here, but learning to do the work part over here is not usually what they'll take on. We have an anniversary special going on my book right now. It's Opportunity Intersection. And all you got to do is get a hold of Profitable Hobbies and give Tammy a call. She can help you. If you're doing this direction, a business plan is the #1 place to start, okay? How many of you are really certain about what you're going to do with the last few days of your life? Have you begun to see or have a vision of what really is important? That bucket list movie, I've never seen it. I've heard it all these years, and I never have watched it till today. And given the fact that my 38th anniversary was yesterday, and they were sitting on the top of a pyramid talking to each other about what's really important, and the 2 questions the gods ask you before you can answer is, 1, have you known joy in your life? And the second one, have you passed joy on to anyone else? And those are tough questions to deal with. But if you can somehow sink your teeth into something that's going to give you those 2 answers to those 2 questions, my gosh, you start to have something worthwhile to work on. And if you'll realize that what you're doing this personal brand exploration for, the reason we're going to do this is, first of all, kind of guide your directions. I talk constantly about this side of your life as your as-is world where you are right now. What you want to do is try and shape your life over into a better world. Well, for you personally, what would be better? And it'll help you guide those directions and present you to the world in the best possible light, which is where you hope to actually be. So not entirely realistic of where you are. A brand is a way of stretching yourself, or basically focusing yourself is a better way to say it. Instead of all the possibilities that most artists struggle with, and we're going to try and focus your efforts and your energy in one single targeted direction. It's a way of thinking. And we usually end up in our life where we think. What we think about is what we chew on, and what we chew on is what we swallow, and what we swallow is eventually who we become. And instead of all over the place, branding is an attempt to put a lightning rod up to where you'll get the spark, the flash, to end up exactly where you want it to end up. Playing in the marketplace is perhaps the most challenging thing in the world. Only 3 people out of 100 have an ongoing enterprise. You stop right now and ask anyone in your circle, every person within your range of your voice, if they've ever owned their own business. And 9 out of 10 will say no. They've had a job. That's all they know. And it's, if you're the kind of person that can go into the marketplace and work on that direction, you'll realize that it is a constant balancing act. I really made a tremendous transition from where I was in dentistry. I took the road less traveled, and then I'm trying now to leave a path for others as I finish up my years. And as you take that same kind of pathway, it seems to have this same kind of pattern to it. The beginning of your efforts, you'll have a dream, you should make a map and a plan, you should do your preparations and your gathering, and then you launch it. From the time you've launched it, you'll want to constantly measure and check your directions solve the problems that are in your pathway, and then invest all your time and energy in sharing. So these are the 7 steps up Success Mountain. This is the entire core of my Opportunity Intersects training program. Because a brand is you. The brand is not your work. The brand is you. And this is the process of building a brand and then learning to sell it. Session 1, we did the theory of the brand. Session 2 now, we're going to go after the efforts to begin to build it. So, get your notepad, and what I want you to do is start catching the whispers of your life. Every time something pops you, every time something interests you, when that curiosity button goes off, you should be tracking it. You should gather it like a butterfly. Keep it in a journal. Keep it in a place where you literally can begin to recognize what you're dealing with. And then session 3 next week, we'll go in start into the learning how to use the brand. I ask this question every year, and to me this is the most poignant slide of the series. Are you willing to bet the level of your success, or the lack thereof, for the entire rest of your days on the fact that you do or don't know what a good personal brand is and how to use it? It's quite a hammer, because you can say to yourself, well, it doesn't matter that much. But I think those are few foolish thoughts. I'm going, why go just sit down and watch TV every day, watch the news and ignore what's going on in the world and just exist? I can't see making the last precious few years of your life just existing. That to me is just not a great way to go at it. Steve Covey made his whole life around the North Star. It's the one star that does not move, and it's the one star in navigational circles that everyone needs to know, because it stays put. And then your comparative movement from here to here can be measured and tracked accurately. So the idea of a business plan matched with a personal brand begins to give you a North Star. This is the direction you're headed. Working in the context of ultra-famous brands like Dior and Vuitton, creative spirits are always going to feel reined in. It's important they're free to develop ideas. And rather than detracting from the principal job, it actually reinforces it. I think of money invested in brand development as venture capital. It's not a big investment compared to the returns. So when you find people that talk about it in these terms, and it's talking about the major business brands out there, you've got to reinforce the fact that it probably works quite well in the marketplace to have a really brand and then really target it, really stay on it. This is the guy that started Amazon. A brand for a company is like a reputation for a person. You earn reputation by trying to do hard things well. So look at those words: reputation, reputation, reputation. This means you either have the option to just let your brand evolve and the marketplace identify you and your brand, or can you somewhat maneuver that? Can you somewhat control that? Can you somewhat direct the brand? Brand that captures your mind gains behavior. The brand that captures your heart gains commitment. And you want to have this kind of relationship with the economy? Two big questions: to let it brand yourself, you brand it, or you let the marketplace do it for you. And does it happen by accident, or can you maybe do it by design? By design means you put up the lightning rod. This is the definition of what you'd like, where you'd like lightning to strike. And you have the power and the ability to control that and help direct that. In the theory, we went through the theory, real value, 4 parts of the brand, and why you should learn should your personal brand become. Now we're going to talk about how to get it set up and flesh it out, the tactics, getting beyond jack of all trades, and then the next show we'll talk about process before perfection and starting your own fire. A way to develop your brand is to hang a mirror on the wall that sees just you. I think the battle of life is to see ourselves as other people see us, not how we make up our image and thinking it's what it may perhaps really more realistically be. And if you can look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, how am I doing with this brand thing? It takes quite a bit of courage to literally come in and start to move your image of yourself from as is over here to better over here. So what I hope you'll do is make yourself some promise that you're going to go after these threads of interest and enhance them. If you've had this itch your whole life to write a book, then let's do that. If you want to do a music piece, you want to write a song, then let's do that. If you want to leave a legacy, then there's ways to put things in place that will outlive your individual lifetime. And how I go at it is what I call the trade winds. I love navigation things. When I started to learn to fly and play with that part of my life, navigation became quite an issue because you've got to know where you left and how you're doing along the way in order to get where you really want to go. And if you don't know how to read a compass and you don't understand how that works, you don't have much shot at success. I also think the best analogy in comparison to success is the mountain climb. We all start down in the valley, and to get to the summit really requires a lot. Not everyone wants to. Not everyone's willing to make the effort and sacrifice it takes to climb a really difficult mountain. And so the climbing part, to me, the best effort you can possibly make is to climb with other people that like to climb similar mountains. Success to me is always an uphill task, not something you can ask, excuse me, ask anyone else to do for you. You can pick out a new mountain, but every time you do, you lose time. So you can't not mess with this much. This starts, the more you can figure it out, and the sooner you can define this in your life, the more chance you're going to have of getting something out of it. Success is not measured by what a person accomplishes, but by the opposition they've encountered. The courage with which they maintain that struggle against overwhelming odds. I talk often about the famous sentence, the most famous sentence in all of English literature. Charles Dickens, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Because that's kind of how life really is. The story within all our lives is super challenging. On one hand, it could not be better in my life right now. On the other hand, it almost couldn't be worse. And I said on yesterday, which is the 38th anniversary from the moment that it changed the entire course of my life, and majorly rewarding. I just can't imagine my life going any other pathway. And yet now I have opportunities and problems that go along with those opportunities that's just unbelievable. And I think that's true for just about everybody. I know for a fact that if you're going to take something on that's really worthwhile, it has to be one of commitment. If it's convenience you're after, then this is not the direction to even consider. Master's program is aimed completely at developing your skills and then learning how to do well in the marketplace. Not one or the other in our world. And the primary tool of this whole business development is your personal brand. When you trade something, you really don't want to sit down and just trade whatever. It's way better to make plans and make decisions in the trading process so that you're ahead of the game. And artists who do poorly in the marketplace consistently do not understand what they don't know about business. They think all you do is produce whatever it is and then sit it out with a price tag. don't understand at all the implications of what it takes to make that succeed. And that's going at your business and your brand by accident. I want you to take a thought for a second and consider the fact that if you had one more thing you can hand out about your life, one more statement, and you got a shot, somebody else would pay for it, to put this in the hands of 1,000 people, what would you most want to say on that card? Now, this should come at you as a little whisper. This should be something that says, out of all my living, this is what matters to me. And then if you take that concept and push it a little more, what if whatever you're going to say would be around influencing people from now on? So we're trying to get to the weightier things, the deeper implications, what I think is the true motivation of most human beings. When you bump into a concept like this, I cannot read that sentence without laughing. It is just the most unusual observation turned into a sentence, and how could it be any better from the Mark Twain? So I put this in my journal to help me begin to see, is there some way I could say something about what I think life has held for me and the future of potential in a similar kind of dramatic way? And if you don't have a clue how your brand is or what you're trying to go after, then you're using a 2-bit little screwdriver to try and do a really big job. And we're going to try and do it and describe you in a process. So the theory is the brand, the building of the image, and then growing it. Who are you? What do you have to trade in the marketplace? And what do you want to become known for? Another way to kind of dig at this and explore is the possibility that you get on the elevator with Oprah Winfrey or what's her name? Can't think of her name. Martha Stewart. Opportunity for Martha Stewart. And you didn't have anything prepared to say. They turn to you and say, who are you and what do you do? And you got 11 seconds to describe that. Wouldn't that make your heart sick if you weren't ready? And the idea is to plant seeds. This is what this whole thing is all about. So if you talk about a farmer, this is a great quote, story that I've used for years. When you try and plant something, it will parallel what you'd have in your mind as to what will actually grow. When you plant a seed, you don't get to decide how it's going to turn out from that point. You compare the human mind with the land because the mind, like the land, doesn't care what you plant in it. It will return what you plant. So let's say the farmer has 2 seeds. One is corn and the other is poison. He digs the holes, puts them in the earth, and covers them up, waters them. Invariably, the land will return what was planted. It's called the law of the harvest. It will return poison and just as wonderful abundance as it will corn. So up come the 2 plants. Human mind is far more fertile and far more incredible and mysterious than the land, but it works exactly the same way. What we put in our minds and what we help plant in the minds of others is all that can actually be returned. So we really do have a tremendous amount of control in the marketplace and in the economy. And what you want to do is plant a certain mental position as often as you possibly can. I can't imagine a more worthless way of growing old than to have nothing planted and nothing returned. I want you to rate your personal confidence right now. It's quite a factor. Your personal confidence about your artistic future, whether 1 is I'm probably not going to make it, and 10, there's no way I'm not going to make it. Because if you lack the basic fundamental decisions about success, then planting the seeds they won't ever even germinate. They won't ever even take off. It's finding a reason and a direction to go forward with your life. So when I get going up to fishing, I got several reasons I can go after someone relationship in the marketplace, or I can go get some help to help me do a better job of fishing. And when I began to learn that upscale clients and patrons were what I really needed to have in my life that would make a difference, then I began to know, okay, that's the big fish I'm after. And in the business plan, the branding part of things has got a tremendous amount to do with altruistic value. So if we look at what is an altruistic seed that you're trying to plant, it's idealism, high-mindedness, benevolence, loftiness, unselfishness, magnanimous, generous, noble, big-hearted, and unselfish. These are really, really subtle human characteristics and human traits. And if you can sense that what you're building and the direction that you're going has a great deal to do with this, then all of a sudden you begin to pull a better card into your life and into the marketplace. In the first session, we talked about Ron. Ron's on with us in the show tonight. He made a statement to me once. They said that they had heard of him and was one of the best custom engravers in the area, and they called him. Now that's when things are really beginning to shape up. You're doing the job. You're getting in front of the marketplace, in front of the economy enough that then your brand is beginning to work for you. Jose has accomplished the same thing. They call him. They know enough about him now and know what he does and who he is. They call him and say, we need you here, 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 and here. I think it takes time for us to begin to realize that we're supposed to accomplish something with this last few years. We can either sit and just watch one damn movie after another. We can eat, we can sleep, we can go visit, we can go fishing, we can do just about anything to kind of spend the time. But the thing that I think we should be looking at is this contribution that we might make with these last few years. And the whole significance from branding to marketing to advertising to then PR is a selling pathway that teaches you how to get from an amateur to the master and actually get paid to do it. Your brand is your fish hook. What you throw out is about all that can actually hook and bring in the relationships. And if you learn that process of fishing, the marketing effort is the fishing process. So where you toss out your hook is then marketing. Advertising is the strict definition. Ongoing paid public non-personal announcements on a persuasive message by an identified sponsor. The non-personal presentation of promotion by a firm of its products to existing and potential customers. The only one we have that works well is advertising by word of mouth. This, by the way, is the strongest advertising mechanism there is. So if you've got your brand done and you understand your marketing, then your advertising will begin to take care of itself. And eventually what you'll have is this upscale customer, this relationship with an individual that is so strong. Kelly Thurgood's one of our successful masters, and almost all of his work is for one very special client, one very special patron. And he's a hunter. He likes to travel all over the world and hunt. Comes home and has them usually mounted, sample example, and then Kelly does the base or the furniture for this guy. But he also takes Kelly on those hunting trips. Kelly is losing his hearing. So can you imagine at a time when he's now moving into a really interesting, difficult period of his end of his life? He's got this relationships in his place that literally takes care of all his personal needs and worries. So how to separate yourself from everyone else is a brand. You want to look at it as a combination of these elements, this element, this element, this element. These all make up who you are and what your brand is. but some of them dominate others. Some concepts are small in the mixture, but others are tremendously strong. And I think this is what grows. It mostly ends up with your preference, the things that you really do like to concentrate on. And it's you that should focus on that. You will uncover that passionate direction in your own individual efforts. So when you're looking at how is marketing described, every person who looks at and says and comments on different concepts, no matter what you say and what she hears, or what she says and what you hear, it's all perception. And it's almost always not really actually the truth. It can be a combination of several things that end up giving an image and a degree of perception. When you're working on your selling and trading functions and you have that perception of value working on, then the price will be based on the demand, and all of a sudden now you're starting to develop a personal brand that is actually something that you can work with. It's a collection of all the things an audience will experience and how all the brand elements work together to create that perception. So color, typeface, style, brand, placement, treatment, all these things begin to define what your brand or what it should be for you. It should try to be as consistent as you can with it, and what you want that brand to exude is trust. PR is when someone else is bragging about you. And I think this is accomplished by the INA network, because we can get on Google Plus now and brag about each other something fierce. And what a great way to grow an individual brand. To nudge each other's careers forward, to me, is the reason social media is actually working as well as it is. Since I was a young man, the most I wanted to contribute to this world in some unique way. I've been working on that directions for the last 50 years. I got to meet Boyd K. Packer, who was one of the top general authorities for the Mormon Church, and he said, asked him how you could live a great life, and he said, son, you can dream up a great life and then invest every day trying to make that dream come true. Now I swallowed that concept hook, line, and sinker. And that's the direction I have gone now. For 50 years of my life was a dream over here. My as-is world was over here, and my dream world has been over here. And I've tried to make my life this sculpture instead of the ordinary one. I left dentistry when it was just not being productive for me. I'd been a dentist for 15 years, and I just hated going to work. And all of a sudden, my hobby showed up. And my interest in my hobby just literally overpowered everything in my life. And I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to push this and see if I can't actually turn it into something. So, from here on out, what we're going to do is gather together, learn more about business, and improve our technical skills, and then help each other continue to succeed. At some point, we're going to end up having a masterpiece. I'm convinced of it. We're well on our way. When I send out, and I do often, people want to know who we are and what we're doing, and I send out my passionate prescription. What I'm mostly doing is talking about those who've succeeded, those who've taken on really lofty efforts and really lofty tasks, and actually pull those things into their own individual lives. And if you don't bother to track these moments and these threads of interest, you're going to bump into ideas and concepts and people that really turn you on. But if you don't have them a way of capturing them, keeping them in your life, building this personal journal, whenever you see someone else's climb up Success Mountain, if it turns you on, then what you ought to do is say, I wonder if I can do that. If they can succeed, then maybe there's a way for me to actually succeed. So the personal brand is a navigation tool. It's a way for you to guide your efforts from where you are to where you really do want to be. And when I find somebody like Sam Maloof to follow, not that you're going to end up making chairs, rocking chairs, and make that your brand. Look at what Sam has done and study it. Try and be careful with seeing. I've talked in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 shows about a professional image of you as who you are and what it is you do. Remember the picture of Tony Swarton, the sword maker for this movie industry? And now this one is Sam Maloof. If you could have a picture of you before you die in this format, in this circumstance, I use the picture of me staring at my carved eggshell or carving the eggshell. It is just without a doubt, that's Lou Jensen's life. That's who I've become. And if you could die at 93 and know that your chair's 15 to 30,000 a piece and you got a 6-year waiting list, it's a pretty good brand to follow. And then you notice in the stories, I've tracked Sam for years. I like what he did with his life. And I watch for these kinds of concepts that literally help me begin to build a ditch and design for my own pattern of living. What I try to do, what I want to accomplish. I saw his brand and I went, oh, yeah, Lord, this is the icon. This is the actual iconic form of his signature and his name. And this ended up being his paradise. You could come and spend a week with him. It costs you $5,000 to go spend a week with him just to watch him work. Just to watch him work and listen to him. I've said as much as he has said forever that your creative space is your dedicated studio. This is church. This is sacred turf. This is what you want to grow in your life. And around you that literally helps you trade with the world. And then if you're talking about exposure, not only did he compete in all of these events and activities, he won many, 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 many awards. Never used a pattern. I just can't get all. This is all exposure. Everything on these orange lists are exposure, exposure, exposure for a really, really great human being. Every time I go through this, I'm just stunned at the amount of work. This is his statement. I didn't engineer anything. I just did by the feel and by the way a curve looks. I know there's formulas on how to do all these engineering things, but I don't think formulas work. It's a process of trial and error. Work towards perfection. To be a part of anything one does, you've got to put yourself into it. Does that sound like our stuff? So from tonight forward, the big question is, are you going to make your design and develop your brand, or is it going to happen by accident or not at all? I'm trying to show you there's a pattern to make this work. You know by the pattern of these two edges here that that's the corner in a puzzle. And there's only 4 pieces in the entire puzzle, 5,000 pieces of that design. Then you know these are the edges. You literally start to build the outside perimeter and define the brand and then fill it on up. It's exactly like putting a puzzle piece together. When you see something like this, this really begins to help give you that esoteric feel. A fact or an idea will lighten their mind, but you tell them the story and you touch their soul. Your brand and what you've done with your life should be the story that you then begin to tell. Hand me the flag of any problem and I'll show you that within that opportunity, within that problem is always a huge opportunity. Don't look at the problems in the negative aspect that they're keeping you from your future. The problems in front of you are your future. Problems are opportunities, always. Instead of paralyzing your future, you should be looking for the opportunity within the problem. The theory of the brand is going to be the great becoming of who you will then eventually become. I share teaching stories out of experience from what I'm doing. The kids communicate with no inhibitions. They speak from the heart. Strive to communicate person to person, heart to heart with everything you do. Your stories will create intimacy and relationships, and that's the essence of a strong brand. Look at that. Ron Schneeberger, are you looking at that sentence right now? Realize that the stories that teach, the stories that have taught you, are the stories you need to now craft and begin to also share. And all of a sudden it gives you a reason for growing old, a reason for being. If you produce these teaching stories and they're the seeds of what you have to sell, you don't know what your heart worked just to make a buck. You're trying to make a difference in the world of the struggles. Jay, you should be looking at this right now with the experience that happened in your show this weekend when the storms of life came through and just turned you upside down completely. And so now you're looking at things from a perspective of saying, well, this is the kind of thing that can happen, but how do you get through that kind of struggle? You now have experience based on actual doing, and that then becomes really valuable information to help encourage the life of a beginner. Because the first thing we sat down in the green room today to get ready for the show, everybody was asking Jay, because we all knew how the show had been kind of a disaster. We were all asking, and he was describing it, and every one of us said, yeah, it happens to all of us. Sooner or later, the roof caves in on everybody. And yet, there's a teaching story there. Some of my greatest difficult moments are now my major teaching stories, the things that I trade with the world and with the economy. Who are you, and who do you want to trade with, and what do you have to trade? By the time of fish you're after, we'll begin to develop the brand or the hook. All you know how to do is tie the hook on the line and throw it in the water. You're going to have a long time before anything really works out. It's this oft falling. Is that not the killer part of life? Just when you think you got it figured out, it hands you a whole new curve every time. Darwin has been such a good story, such a good friend for so many years, and every time he would carve, he was uneasy about what would then be next and how to raise the prices and doing everything that he does. But now, every piece of Darwin's work is just worth a fortune and is growing like crazy. Our family has one of his earliest pieces, and everybody's now fighting over what's it probably worth. And as you continually work on your effort to grow the circle of your image, the circle of your influences, that will in process drive your prices higher and higher until you die. And then what happens to the price of your work? It goes clear through the roof. So we got a chance to recreate ourselves every day, to say, this is where I'm stuck, this is my as-is world, this is what I might want to try to accomplish, and have it actually end up being better. So your 4 parts of your brand building: you got to discover the brand is, then you've got to grow it, then you've got to give it constant attention, and then now we've got to begin to learn to use it. It's an intuitive process. The searching for intuition and using your imagination is quite a process. I've watched it in particularly Craig Hohn's life because Craig knows Sam Maloof's story. And when you have that image to look at and say, I wonder what I can do to help grow my own level of awareness and satisfaction and head in a similar direction. And when you see that the seeds you're going to plant in the lives and minds of other people is what then I think your brand really ought to become. What's your ultimate motivation? Mine, my entire life has been to control my time. Woody Searle, my mentor, told me that rich and famous was not the way to go. What you mostly wanted out of life was the control of your personal time. And I do think it's the #1 motivation. So when I stumble on to having a good time as my job, you can see now why that became a part of my brand. I have an 11-second elevator rule, and if you're a poor person, you have to get stuck on an airplane next to me going anywhere. By the time we land, you're going to know about Lou Jensen, and you're probably going to have this sewn into the fabric of your life somehow. Find something you love doing, and never work another day in your life. Find something this strong that you can then develop in the lives of other people to help them with their own climb. If you don't have a brand, increasing the odds in the marketplace can be really tough going. The marketplace needs to be able to distinguish you from all the other options. The brand separates you from the crowd. And we work with the half of the economy who like what we like. Okay? You're not trying to appeal to everyone. It doesn't matter how other people react to it, just the half of the economy that like what you like. Okay? And you got to reach the top 10%. Doesn't make a lot of sense to play with any other fish in the economy. So now start your big brand list. Everything that you think has an implication on your brand, you need to gradually put into your journal. And you use every opportunity and every occasion to pick up and deal with, capture the things that you really like and enjoy. Because the odds are the half of the economy you're after like exactly what you like. First time I met Al Hohn, we went to lunch together. He knew I was working with Keith and Craig, his uncle and his cousin, a lot. And he sat down with me. He says, Lou, I says, I don't really know what you could do for me. I says, well, Al, I actually looked up your name, and it came up Al Hohn Kitchen Cabinets. And I says, if you want to continue to do that for another entire generation, you can. But if it was my business, before the sun set, I would change it to Hohn's Studio, which he did do. But Al has not always played cards that I would play. He's picked his own pathway for sure. But what I would go after is the things that he has built into his life are not a part of what he presents on his website. He's won the Western Design Competition more times than anybody else. He's one of the leading Western designers in the nation, in the world, and it's not here anywhere. And there's no face with a smile. If you haven't figured out what a profile image, graphic image, and why Google has jumped on that with Google+, and realize that a really fun, smiling, warm, inviting facial recognition image of you is just huge. He doesn't have that either. Don't have his first name, and there's no INE in the logo to help tie him and mix him in with the group. Now I look at that and I go, as far as Al, no one's had more success with this than Al. But the brand is still missing. Because Al's concentrating on the things that he produces. And that isn't what Alice should or is and should be selling. It's him. He is the secret in the marketplace. He is the secret of everything that he designs and does. And he even knows this image, because this is the piece you've all heard me talk about this many times. He came into my class one day running with this sample of shavings that he pulled out, and he says, "That's it right there, isn't it?" This was his life before. This is when he took on the designing competition furniture. Without a brand and constantly maintaining to build it, the odds are you will not succeed. As soon as Keith Hone stumbled on to doing his carvings like this piece has caused more stir because people know it's a wood carving. They can see it. And he doesn't have to even do the whole carving. This release form is what has branded the family, the entire family. And this was Craig's piece that won the world championship. First place, national championship. First place, solid block of walnut with this songbird coming out of it. Now his son is developing his own brand now, trying to move into a position where he will be known and famous for his individual work. He is now building the art of Craig Hone, the story of Craig Hone. And every time you start to see some parts of the puzzle and realize that it is like finding the key that then begins to unlock the very next effort you're going to make, you start to have things that will begin to be memorable to you. Something that is unique that sets you apart from everybody else. And those are huge factors. You're trying with your brand to set yourself apart. Got to not be the same as everyone else. What you're trying to do is, I've told my own story that became our story together, and what we need now to make this combination work is your story. Would you know your place in life, you must stand apart from it. This one hit me hard years and years and years ago. Start to develop your own 11-second rule and then perfect it. Gradually make it better and better. In 11 seconds you can say who you are and what it is you do in a memorable fashion so no one ever forgets it. Not just an answer. What you're trying to do is actually turn people upside down when they get a chance to meet you. I've kept this a long time. This was a card my dad had on his desk the day I walked into his desk the day after he died. Beautiful, beautiful old roll-top desk, and on a card was written, sitting right in the middle of the desk, as if, Louis, pay attention to this. What we be what we are, and to become what we are capable of becoming, is the only end in life. And so many people struggle with this idea. Ron's now messing with a concept that would really define basically this same issue, but in Ron's terms. When you learn to use your imagination, expect miracles, and begin to look for what is it I'm looking for, what do I do that I most love doing that would have any benefit, any efficacy in other people's lives? Craig has drawn, sketched every day for 15 years. And I kid you not, when you can take a profile of someone and sketch it and rough it out into something this dramatic and this enjoyable, then all of a sudden you've pulled a tool in your life that really, really gives you some strength. The push that Craig is always talking about is how we push ourselves. Your brand has got to be something that you share that is worthwhile, that begins to be the seeds that you plant in the lives of everyone else. And all it takes is to start with your most basic interests, the things that you most want to do. Now, these are the rules. This is my homework assignment between now and next week. Begin to develop. The first page in your journal should be the 11-second rule. The second page, you start to track these threads of interest that you have. Begin to do your favorite word list, your favorite ideas. Your favorite colors, your favorite fonts, your favorite smells, anything that you can identify as characteristics of your own preferences, okay? Page 4, learn to share what you're doing in the moment that thrills you so much. Capture your individual stories and then boil those things down. Someone's got their microphone on. Would you check your mics, all of you still? So during this next year, you're beginning to develop a business model. This is all the cards of the game, and you're doing it more by design. The more you go at it, the more you'll figure it out, and the more it works. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's what you're beginning to grow and pull into your life, okay? I got to meet the Cowboy Art Associations when I first got the company started. I was invited to their major annual shows in Scottsdale every year. And those old boys, this is their 44th year. And I got to sit down and have lunch with the founders one time, and Grant Speed, he says, I asked him, I says, how was your first show? And he says, you mean, it wasn't our first show. They sold $28 between all of them their first show. And now they sell millions. And I'm going, isn't that how it works? And have they not branded themselves? They brand their own, have their own personal brand, and then they have a brand in the marketplace that combines all of their efforts. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish with the INE Network now. I think handmade for robotics and artificial intelligence hit the economy, even less and less really fine handmade things are going to be really going to be exotic. But oh, don't make me focus anything. Artistic right brain people, we like everything. Every visual image should trigger something in your head about what your preferences are. And the more you capture those and play with them, the more you're going to make sense of what it is that you really like. And then if you plunk into it, Tammy's favorite quote is, everything happens for a reason. And if that's true, then everything has led you to this point in your life. And as long as you've got the theory correct, then playing the game actually begins to improve. Public doesn't know what you're doing with the brand, but you will know. It's all about finding your own compass, giving you some focus, giving you some stability, and then helping you aim yourself in the direction that you really most want to go. It's not too hard when you go through my personal journal to see where the name of my studio so where it came from. What thrills your head, your heart, and your hands is what you then want to try and sell. And we're not just going to be trading stuff. We're going to be trying to develop everything that contributes to your brand. The patterns you prefer, the visual codes that turn you on, your efforts to second guess reality, all the keys of perception, and the strengths that you have individually that separate you from everybody else. And then we'll talk about cutting your losses and succeeding in strength. Years ago, I came up with my own personal concepts, and then I ran into Woody Searle. And Lou Jensen is all over the place all the time, as are most right-brain people. And Woody Searle helped me to a degree, only to a degree, to just concentrate on one nail at a time. He would always bring it up because he knew, he spotted where my weakness was. And the idea of being able to pull more things into your life and base it on stuff that really means a lot to you. I saw this image in an ad years ago, and I pulled it out and kept it in my journal ever since, because this picture speaks to me a ton. I love all the image. I love all the concepts. I love being right there in my mind. And I could die right there. And all that stuff, whatever it hits you, whatever turns you on, is what you want to then put into your life and keep it. Entertain it. Make it a part of what you then sell and trade. I found having a time is my job, and I've redone this so many times. This sign is hanging on my wall in my office right now, because nothing changed. This is what told me it was time to quit dentistry and go play. Go make my life into something worthwhile. And when I bumped into this image as I was learning to airbrush, this is one of the better airbrush pictures I've ever seen. And all of a sudden you have those images and those ideas that begin to help you define you. Yours won't be the same choices as mine, but when you find them, you've got to hang on to them. Put them in some place where it begins to build the definition of kind of what your life is. I have 7 areas of interest and enchantment, and I entertain and grow and guard and protect every one of them. Constantly, this is the review I'm making in my life. We were at Albert Hubbard's place. Hubbard's one of the people that probably affected my future as much as any other one person that's already gone. Great founder of the arts and crafts movement in America. Get rid of your regrets. You are who you are because of what you've experienced and rightly understood and accepted. All experiences are good, and the bitter ones best of all. I started coming up with the idea of the Forever Letter and me hand engrave people's sentiments on crystal and glass, stone, and metal for them. Their words of love and relationships permanently etched on something really began to make a dent in the marketplace and the economy. And all of that comes out of when you spot something like this that's been hand lettered and created in such a way. Everybody's heard this quote before. This is the old Einstein quote. But look how creative the word imagination has been contrived. Just so, God, but if you don't keep this image in your life and cross paths with it every now and again, then it doesn't affect you at all. You see it once and it's gone. This should be a screen capture. This should go into your personal journal, and then every now and again you go back through it and bump into the things that impact you. I use this often. Most of you are bored at seeing it, but it's the Ship of Dreams. This is where Lou Jensen plays. It's the kind of thing that I've actually done my entire life. And I really try to share it with the aspect that what you're looking for is the same concept in your own life. This helps you see where you might go with the rest of your days. If you capture the threads of interest and put them in your journal, your personal journal. I think what I need to do next week is have a review of the electronic digital journal. If you've got your cell phones and stuff now, your smartphones, you can go right to your journal so easy, it's unbelievable. And it's what I've done manually for years. Now I can do electronically, and it is so much easier. But it's my bet you won't find your best brand until you start looking at the things that really, oh, and look what he's done here. Look what Morrissey's done. Do you see that star right there? And it's got the number 7 on it. Oh, God. Oh, I've never seen that in the whole time I've had that in my life. And there it is. There it is. More of the same. Well, I hope that there's been a few more keys in this whole thing for you, that you've just seen what you probably ought to pull into your life and interest you the most is those things that matter to you. Not another soul. This is the stuff that is you controlling the brand that you want to then package and share with the world. And it doesn't work well when you grab somebody else's life and say, well, all I'm going to do is make my life their life, or their life my life. And I go, well, that's not good. That's not the right way to go at it. Okay, any questions before we wrap it up? We got through it without me collapsing today, so I do have a show to wrap up. How's Easter been for everybody? You all have a good Easter and great time with your family? I hope so. I hope so. All right.
We had pizza pie for Easter dinner.
Pizza today. You got an Easter pizza, huh?
Yeah.
Why not? As long as it's easy.
I've just been in the studio carving all day.
That's a pretty good way to grow old, isn't it, Lance?
Yeah.
I've been working on doing repair work all day so I can get ready for this next weekend.
I'll bet you have. You got quite a, I don't know, when things like that happen and shows can unfold on you, oh, that's tough. That's such a challenge to keep your head in the game and get through it. But
well, like I said in a couple of my posts, hey, now it's just a matter of time. I pieced it all back together, temporary repairs, and go on.
And go on. Yep, that's all you can do. Tam, tell them about the show you had in Sedona, Arizona, where the weather got you.
That was very interesting. We were set in an area they call vortexes there in Sedona, and a wind vortex came down straight on our tent, and it snapped all four legs of the tent. Everything was inside was fine. It was just the tent legs. And so, yeah, we went down after crying a bit. Went down to Home Depot and found some fence posts and stuck the remaining legs down into 8-foot fence posts. And you do what you do, and you get creative on the fly.
It's called creative problem solving, isn't it? Yeah. And the truth is, everyone goes through it. There's no way around that. That is a part of the growing process. But it's a little bit hard when that never goes away. I sit and think of all the times I've almost had it. I'm almost going to be done with the struggle of being a human being, and then, bam, something else just, now we got this to deal with, and now we got this to deal with. But is that not who that kind of cultivates and cultures who you become? Tammy, I could brag about you all night long because I remember you the first time I ever met you. And I met so many people in my career, but not everyone do I remember, but I remember you and Ed at the show in Denver. And look how far you've come. Look what you've accomplished, and then you're young. You've got so much more you can do. And I sit and look at that. I'm going, okay. The difference between Tammy's career and a lot of other artistic people I have bumped into is you've done it more by pattern. Tammy, you've been a good student. You've listened. You've done your best at trying to develop what it will take to make it work. It's still challenging. I mean, that never seems to go away.
I don't think that will ever go away. I think that the challenge will always be there. And that's
yeah.
The journey.
That's the realistic.
I think the journey.
But from your very first show you did when you were in downtown Denver, you won the show.
Yeah.
And you were on television that very first go-round as well, and then you got some really decent publicity. I mean, you've cultivated the very best possible way you know how. You've learned to fish the upper-end crowd. Your whole overall, you got your book done now, the things that will define kind of your future. You're handling it as well and as carefully as I know, and I can't congratulate you enough, Tammy. You really ending up, I think, maybe even beyond what you initially dreamed, my dear. I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we finish today? And good to have time with you. I gotta have a little rest for a minute before I do my 38th anniversary show. Can you, God, when I sit back and think how many years this is. Tammy and Ed came to my 30th anniversary party 8 years ago. Tammy threw a surprise party for me here at the home studio, and she says, you've got to come over to Home's place. We've got somebody, they want to meet you. And so I said, okay. And I literally drove up as naive as hell. I didn't even think about what was about to happen or coming at me. And I went in and I'm just so curious. I wonder who I got to meet now, and kind of began to work with them. And I come in the door, and here's all my friends and all my relationships that we've had for 30 years. And now it's not very far away from that 40th party. And I promise you, you get something passionate that you love doing and you stay on it for 40 years, you'll get more out of it than you ever dreamed. Gonna be fun. All right, troops, I'll catch up with you. If you can come and sit in from the beer one more hour, I'll see you in about an hour, and we'll fire up the 30th anniversary. Go to work on these little elements of your personal brand. Regardless of how far along you are with that personal branding, don't not capture these little whispers, these little threads of interest. Put them in a journal. Put them in one spot, the things that you most like, the things that you most enjoy, and the more you begin to collect that little pile of stuff, are your little zingers that you really like, the more you'll see what probably should be your personal brand. Okay? All righty. Good night. See you later.